You cannot do well with finance if you don't have the right set of numbers to start with.
This episode is sponsored by Therapy Notes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello, folks. It's Gordon Brewer, and this is episode number 322 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. So glad you've joined me, and hope you're having a good week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this. So in this episode, I get to talk with a financial planner, and, that's a topic that I think is always good to visit in thinking about how we handle our finances, how we handle our money. Here the last week, I met with my accountant just in preparation for tax season, and it's always interesting to think about those things. So in this episode, I'm joined by Carla Titus, who is a financial planner who is located in Portland, Oregon, but she has a real passion for working with small businesses and in particular, people like us in our profession. So I think this is always good to hear different perspectives on this. And so looking forward to you hearing my conversation with Carla. So one thing I do want to remind you of is that open enrollment is still available for the Practice Collaborative. So the Practice Collaborative, the private practice, the Practice of Therapy Practice Collaborative, let me say that correctly, the Practice of Therapy Collaborative. Okay, there, I got it right. So is a membership community that I have revamped. I've had several different versions of membership communities over the last several years, but this is one that I've put together, and just listening to folks like you and just following some of the examples of some of my other colleagues in this whole consulting space of being able to provide something that is a little more intensive than I've done before. So the Practice Collaborative, we will meet once a week, and each week we'll have a different theme to it. And that one week we'll do a mastermind, traditional mastermind, where we'll have a hot seat and people can ask questions of a particular person. We'll also have a work day one of the weeks during the month. We'll also have a day in which we will let you hear from other experts in the field, other consultants and other folks that do what we do. And then also I'll be doing another teaching component in which I'll provide some lessons and tutorials for the folks in the network or in the collaborative. So I'd really love for you to join me. And you can find out more about this by going to practiceoftherapy.com/practice collaborative. And you might want to go ahead and jump in. Enrollment closes March 31st, depending on when you're listening to this particular episode, but we've only got just a few more days left before our enrollment will close. So be sure and check it out. And also, before we get to my conversation with Carla, I'd love for you to hear from one of the members of the Psychcraft network, along with something from our sponsor of the podcast, Therapy Notes.
Hey there. If we haven't met, my name is Lisa Mustard, and I'm the person behind the scenes of the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard, a podcast where I interview seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapists from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. Plus, you can also earn continuing education contact hours from some of my episodes. So, to learn more about the show and get your first continuing education contact hour for free, head on over to my site, lisamustard.com.
Have you ever wished your private practice could run as smoothly as a well-oiled machine? Well, look no further because Therapy Notes is here to revolutionize your practice. Therapy Notes is the complete practice management system you've been dreaming of. With everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with clients remotely, create rich documentation, and handle insurance billing, it's your secret weapon for a smoother practice. And the best part? It's accessible wherever and whenever you need it. Yep, even on the go. Imagine having more time for what truly matters, your clients. It's like having an extra set of hands, but digital. And here's the kicker. It's the very EHR Gordon relies on in his own practice. So, you know it's the real deal. Say goodbye to paperwork nightmares and hello to more time and better quality care. Check out Therapy Notes today at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Oh, and don't forget to use the promo code GORDON to get 2 months free. That's practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes with the promo code GORDON. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm looking forward to you hearing from Carla Titus. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Carla. And Carla is located in, I believe you said Portland, Oregon.
That's
Yes,
correct.
good. So as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed?
Yeah, my journey starts with a mom who's an accountant and me knowing that I didn't want to be one. So, but I was good with numbers. So I decided to go into business. And obviously, in business, finance is the profession I chose. I like money. I was good with numbers. So I figured might as well and leverage those strengths. And I started working in corporate about 11 years ago, doing all the finance roles from, financial analyst all the way to senior finance manager and controller. And I found that it was very rewarding to be able to help businesses understand the financial side of what was happening, of the decisions they were making, and the impact that that might have. And so I decided to bring that same corporate financial tools to a small business owner because I realized how much of an impact it could have to those small businesses that don't normally get access to this level of expertise, the support around the finances. Honestly, finances are not even talked about much in the world of business. It's really more about accounting or bookkeeping. And we kind of forget about this forward-looking, forward planning function that is so critical and important in driving the business to the goals that they want to achieve, the growth that they want to see, and ultimately the profitability that we need to have to stay in business long term.
Yeah. Well, you brought up something that's interesting that I think maybe our audience might like to hear the distinction. I know even in my own mind, when I think of finance, I automatically think of accounting and bookkeeping and all of that sort of thing. So how do you distinguish between, thinking about finances versus thinking about accounting and bookkeeping?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say it all starts with a solid foundation. And that's why I bring up bookkeeping and accounting, because you cannot do well with finance if you don't have the right set of numbers to start with. So having a good bookkeeper in your team, having a good accountant for the tax strategy side of it, it's going to be critical pieces and the foundation we build finance on. And so if we don't start by having that solid foundation, then you can't really build a house on top of crumbling
Yeah.
foundation. So we want to start with that. But the finance function is really a proactive forward looking, a proactive planning approach, a starting to craft what could be in the future, and also put solid plan of action to execute towards those future goals that you've outlined. I think often what I see is CFOs are putting numbers out there, but they don't really know how you're going to be able to achieve them. They're not telling you how. And you're just sitting here thinking, I don't know if I can achieve those goals. Those seem really unrealistic. But if I give you 10 actions to take that would help us get into the direction of achieving those goals once we've defined them, now you're more likely to take action and execute. And even if you don't hit those goals, you'll most likely be better off than you were before because you proactively address and plan for your business success.
Right, right, yeah. So, with your approach, how do you begin to do that with the people you work with?
Yeah, so with clients, we start with what we call a strategic financial plan. And it's really outlining what is the next 12 months going to look like for your business. If you don't have any kind of goals, you don't know what you can achieve, we'll start by looking at what have you done so far and then start to get some data points on what could be possible. Sometimes what I find is when looking at numbers for clients in the past year, they had some really good months and they had no idea because they never looked at it. They
Mm-hmm.
then we ask the question, what did you do differently on those months to achieve those higher goals? And then they'll say, oh yeah, I did this marketing strategy, I went on network, I did this and that. And we're like, why are we not doing that again? And
Mm-hmm.
not trying to reinvent the wheel, trying the next new latest thing, investing in a new venture, which is totally fine. And we want to do some of that as well. But let's do what was working. Why work harder? Like, let's work smarter. And your numbers will tell you when that happened and why. So, if we can start by looking at what we've been able to accomplish. If you are a new practice and you maybe haven't gone through a cycle yet, we would just make some assumptions. We will make some educated guesses of what's possible. Obviously, we have experience working with businesses,
Mm-hmm.
so we know the pace of growth that you might be able to achieve in the first year and things that you might want to consider as you're going into business that makes it more realistic. I find business owners can be very positive and well-intended and a little bit ambitious beyond what might be realistic in this. So we bring that financial perspective and realistic approach to the assumptions that we put together so that we know it's something they can attain as far as it goes with their revenue goals or their expense structure, and ultimately really focusing on that bottom line profitability.
Right, right. Yeah, I think, one of the things when we think about profitability, I think sometimes we don't really know about how that plays into what we pay ourselves and all of that sort of thing. And so, why don't you say more about, one question I guess that comes to mind for me in your experience in working with mental health practices, what is a good amount of profit percentage wise for people to be thinking about that is realistic?
Yeah, so we like to really set some what we say benchmark or average type of goals. And then we obviously always want to throw in a little stretch goal there for those practices that are feeling a
Mm-hmm.
little more ambitious and maybe want to,
Mm-hmm.
strive for the max profit they can get. But really, realistically speaking, if a practice is scaling year over year, you're going to see somewhere between 5 and 15% profit, especially if you're getting bigger as a practice and multiple millions of dollars. That profit might, percentage might be smaller, but the absolute dollars are bigger. So then it still
Mm-hmm.
works. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
something that maybe we don't talk enough about. As you grow, the number, the top is much larger. So that percentage might be smaller, but it's still pretty good. And
Yeah.
then when you want to strive for maybe beyond what's average, 20% profitability in some of the practices that we work with is not unheard of. It
Mm-hmm.
takes very cautious control of costs and appropriate lean operating structure for you to be able to achieve that, and
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you're not staffing too highly on the admin side and that you're not hiring too many clinicians that are not performing at capacity, and really keeping an eye on all those metrics very tightly in order for that to be
Mm.
realistic.
Right, right. What sort of ways do you recommend that people kind of track all of that? Of course, so what comes to mind for me immediately is the what I use is QuickBooks for the bookkeeping part. And are there other tools that people use that you see that they find maybe most helpful?
Yeah, we've seen different tools depending on the clients that we work with. Everybody kind of has their preference, but we definitely do work with QuickBooks Online for the most part. It is the industry standard tool. Whether we love it or hate it, that's
Mm-hmm.
besides the point. And we have
Mm-hmm.
a lot to say about it, but it is what works best for this size of businesses that we work with in the mental health space. And that is just the starting point. That's going to give you your three financial statements, your profit and loss, statement of cash flow, and balance sheet, which ultimately will be needed at tax time. So we want to make sure that you're keeping with that every month, reconciling, categorizing things on the bookkeeping
Mm-hmm.
side so that you don't get behind and have to catch up. As far as beyond your accounting tools, there's obviously a plethora of key performance indicators, KPIs that we could be tracking as a practice. One of them
Mm-hmm.
could be your weekly capacity. Are your clinicians, billing the hours they need to be billing, hitting the minimums that you've assigned to them? And if not, what can we do about coaching them and helping them achieve those goals? And if you're seeing some trends, for certain people that are struggling, it's time to step in and really help guide them and share your experience on how to best improve on those metrics. And a lot of the other leading indicators that maybe we don't talk enough about is really inquiry calls, conversion to first appointments, making sure you understand how long does that take? Are we getting enough inquiries? Because that is the starting point on how you will eventually generate revenue with clinical billable hours. And if you're not looking at those metrics and you all of a sudden realize you do not have enough intakes happening, then you need to go fix that first, because that is
Yes.
where it all
Yes.
starts.
Yeah, yes. I'm reminded of my friend Casey Compton, who wrote a book called Fix This Next for mental health providers. And she talks about that as figuring out what are your KPIs and where are the leaks, as I like to call it, and just
Mhm.
where are you missing money that could be potentially brought in that you're missing.
Absolutely. And another aspect of this whole cost structure that you want to be looking at too is how you compensate your clinicians. Are you doing
Mm-hmm.
salary for a minimum number of hours and they're not meeting those minimums? Then
Mm-hmm.
now you're paying out more than what you're generating from a given clinician. And short
Mm-hmm.
term, that happens because everybody has to get up to speed. And maybe if they're new, they're ramping up and it takes 2, 3 months. But over time, they should be producing more than they're costing you. And if you're not
Mm-hmm.
looking at that, and you're feeling really strapped for cash, or you're feeling like you're not making ends meet in your practice, that could be an area that you could start to do further research if you need to switch them to hourly or some other model that might work better for both that
Mm-hmm.
clinician as well as the practice. Because at the end of the day, we do want to retain clinicians, and we want to make sure we have a healthy practice to be able to continue to employ clinicians long term.
Right, right. Yeah. And I think that's a common mistake and it's one that I made early on is when bring on clinicians, you can end up paying them too much and in a way that's not sustainable. And I know that was a big mistake I made in that when I kind of arbitrarily picked what I was going to pay them without really thinking as much about, okay, is this sustainable and is this going to be profitable?
Absolutely. And I think that's why before we make those decisions, it's really key that we run the numbers and do some scenario planning around what can we afford to pay people? Maybe we can only afford to bring associates at this level because we just can't afford the hefty salaries of an experienced hire. And that
Mm-hmm.
is sometimes the reality of a lot of the practices, but they're not looking at that decision. They're just making it without the numbers and the data, and then later dealing with the consequences of having, a lack of workload for those clinicians, and then just seeing the
Mm-hmm.
consequences of their cash disappearing, and they're like not sure why that's happening. And again, we go
Mm-hmm.
back to the numbers to be able to find the answers.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, other than tracking the number of referrals you're getting and clinician caseload, what are some other essential KPIs or key performance indicators that you recommend that people track?
Yeah, if you're in insurance-based practices, making sure that you're looking at your average reimbursement rate is going to be another key indicator if you're healthy or not. Is that going up over time? Is that being cut down because insurance companies are not paying as much, or are they
Mm-hmm.
giving you the appropriate increases? Are you asking for the appropriate increases every year? And making sure that you also, on the private pay side, your fee structure is changing and you're updating those prices over time, because as you know, every everything is more expensive. Labor is more expensive, and
Right.
all services and costs are going up. Therefore, your practice should be revisiting pricing every year just to make sure that you have enough margin in your practice to
Mm-hmm.
afford all the things you need to afford that are just now more expensive.
Right. Right. Yeah. And again, that's something I've kind of learned the hard way is that I probably held off on increasing my prices a little too long. But, once you did make those, even if it's an incremental increase, really doesn't create a problem for clients or that sort of thing. And it increases the profitability.
Yeah, and we always give advance notice anyways, as you know, and clients get to choose. You don't have to choose for them what they can or cannot afford and how their budget's going to work out. If they find that it's valuable for them to see their therapist, they will prioritize it. And if they can't
Mm-hmm.
afford to, they will find someone else. Make sure you're competitive for your area. Of course, you don't want to be priced
Mm-hmm.
out of the market. And also, it's very common that every year there is a minimum, increase expected. And if you can at least set that expectation with clients year over year, there will be no surprise because they know to expect it. Even if it's $5 or $10 a session, it could really add up times the number of sessions you have, times the number of clinicians in your practice. It really can make a
Mm-hmm.
huge difference. So make sure that you're looking at those metrics. And then on the insurance side, make sure you're following up with claims. If you have denials, if you have rejected claims, if
Mm-hmm.
the codes you're billing are not the right ones, like checking with an experienced biller that can tell you, this is how you maybe properly bill this type of claims to get the maximum refund that you can from the insurance companies to make sure
Mm-hmm.
we're not leaving money on the table. I see sometimes practices are not billing high enough and
Mm-hmm.
they're just not getting reimbursed what they should be fully. And we look at that very carefully to ensure we're not leaving money with the insurance
Yeah.
company.
Right, right. And one tip I'll add in there is always bill for your full rate rather than putting on the claim just your contract rate, because things can change with the insurance company, and if they're only going to pay what you put on the claim.
Yeah, they're not coming knocking on your door to say, hey, I think we owe you a little bit more money. Do you want to bill us
Mm-hmm.
higher? They're in business
Yeah.
as well. They're not going to come do you that favor,
Right.
unfortunately. So it's
Right.
up to you to make sure that you're ahead of that.
Yes, very true. Very true. Well, Carla, tell us a little more about your company and how it got started and what all, a little more detail about what you all do.
Yeah, so we are a fractional CFO firm. We started in business about 6 years ago, consulting for all sides of businesses in different industries. And we really specialize in mental health group practices that are growing and need additional support. We come on their team as their leadership position as a fractional CFO that is driving really all the finance function as well as managing the bookkeeping team and accounting team if needed to make sure that it's all working together towards the same goals, that we have goals for the year, that we have a financial plan in place, and that we're also monitoring and tracking financial performance month over month, making sure those reviews actually happen. As you know, we're busy business owners, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard for a practice owner to be doing everything themselves, especially if they're growing and scaling and hiring and dealing with the day to day.
Right.
So bringing in some help to outsource that financial side while still keeping an eye on the numbers and a pulse on what's happening, because those monthly reviews are really helping them see and review
Mm-hmm.
and make decisions around the financial side, as well as strategic meetings where we are making decisions for the longer term and where we want to see the practice go. Really helps drive that function and takes this off the plate of the owner. Again, not the accountability of it. We still want the owner involved and a partner that
Mm-hmm.
actively looking at things. We're not advocating decision making, but we're really augmenting by having an
Mm-hmm.
additional, leaders in the team that's helping drive that function more actively.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Well, Carla, I've got to be respectful of your time. And, this is always an important topic, just thinking about profitability. And, I think most of the listeners understand that if they're not making a profit, they're not going to be able to stay in business. And so it's such a real important thing. And I think this has been a good refresher in the things that we need to keep our eyes on. Any parting thoughts about this topic?
If you struggle with your numbers and shy away from looking at them, just remember it's not a reflection of you as a person. This is just your business. You can improve it, but you need to know your starting point so that you know whether or not you're making progress towards a desired goal. So make sure you take a
Mm-hmm.
look at that P&L if you haven't for a while.
Right.
At least do it monthly, because it's going to reveal a lot of things that maybe you could be doing differently to help steer the company in the right direction financially.
Right. And it might even be a happy surprise. You might be doing better than you think you are.
Sometimes that happens and they're like, wow, I am so glad I looked at it. And now they got their day going and they're really excited about what's happening. And if it's not what you expected, that's okay. Guess what? You get another chance at it next month to improve on it, as long as you're looking at it and know what's happening.
Right. Well, Carla, tell folks how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more from you and that sort of thing.
Yeah, make sure that you go to our website, wealthworthwithin.com. In the contact page, you're able to set up a free call if you're ready to hire a fractional CFO. If you're not ready for that, but want to stay in touch and see what we're up to, you can subscribe to our newsletter. And we always share free educational content on all of our social media at Wealth Worth Within, to make sure that business owners are taking control of their finances, feel more empowered, and really start to have, better feelings around their money, and, take some of that action to really improve on what they're working on financially.
Yes, that's great. Well, Carla, it was great to talk with you, and I hope that maybe we can have another conversation here in the future. Well, a big thanks to Carla for joining me on the podcast. And, like I said, this is a great topic to always revisit. And I hope that maybe you got some tidbits and some things to think about. And as much as anything, I hope it encourages you to look at your numbers a little more closely and analyze things and get with some experts around that. I know, like I said at the beginning, I think I said this at the beginning, that I met with my accountant this past week. And one of the things about that is that it always gives me a little more clarity about what I'm doing, and just being able to talk with someone about tax implications and, if you're making enough profit, if what you're doing is financially sustainable. Because I think what can happen is if we don't have a pulse on that, things can get out of hand pretty quickly in a practice. I've heard so many different horror stories where people just didn't have a good grasp on their numbers and just they found themselves in a pickle. So anyway, hopefully you got some good information from this particular episode. And also, before we go, I'd love for you to be able to check out the Practice Collaborative, the Practice of Therapy Collaborative. And you can find out more about that by going to practiceoftherapy.com/practice collaborative. And enrollment for that particular membership community is going to be closing March 31st. So, go ahead and jump in there and enroll. And if you'd like to ask me questions about it or want to jump on a quick phone call, I'm open to doing that to answer any of the questions you might have. So, and also before we go, big thanks to our sponsor of the podcast, Therapy Notes. They're who I use in my practice, and they are, in my mind, the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. And as I've said many times before, I'm always impressed with how they are staying on top of the needs of us that are in private practice and mental health providers by just providing more and more tools within their platform. And it's well worth the investment, and I absolutely get the return on my investment by using them. It's a complete system. So be sure and check them out. You can go to practiceoftherapy.com/therapy notes, and be sure and use the promo code just Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. So take care, folks. Look forward to being with you again next week. Oh, and take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.